Hello there, everybody, and welcome back to the story mode. Today, we are going to be doing another tier list. I know I promised the MCU Phase 5 predictions video, and that is coming. But with the really recent release of Obi-Wan Kenobi, I really wanted to talk about my Star Wars rankings. So today, we're going to be ranking every single Star Wars film and TV show all the way from 1977 to 2022, with the Obi-Wan being the end of it right now. Obviously, this list will evolve over time as we get more and more Star Wars shows, but right now, this will be my thoughts on everything Star Wars. Now, if you're not familiar, I am on a channel that I run called Star Wars Lads, which we talk about Star Wars 3 days a week with some shorts as well during the week. I'm on there every week talking about Star Wars, so you should check that channel out. I don't usually do Star Wars content on this channel because that channel is specifically for Star Wars. But when it comes to tier lists, we usually do the tier lists together. So this will be my individual opinion. And without further ado, let's bring in the list. But yes, please, if you haven't yet, please subscribe to this channel, like the video down below, comment, and let me know what you thought of my list as well as your list. So I've got S through F, but this time I've added an E tier as well. Star Wars is very much so personal for me. It's my favorite franchise. It's my favorite thing, really, in storytelling. So it's hard to really rank these if you're going just purely off of what they mean to me and my favorites, which I am going to be putting this in like favorites order. I do try to take in some objectivity, some obviously more traditional elements of objective filmmaking speak and criticism, because I do have that a hard time turning that part of my brain off when I watch things. But with Star Wars, I love most of this stuff very much, and even the stuff that I might put a little lower tier, I significantly has impacted me and my life as a movie goer and a film fan, and just a fan of fantasy and storytelling. Star Wars is my favorite thing. So if we're going to start off right off the bat here, Star Wars, the original Episode 4, A New Hope, it's an absolute masterpiece. Star Wars is a film that has inspired generations of filmmakers. It's hard to find anyone who is in the fantasy science fiction genre who has not been influenced by the storytelling of Star Wars, the universe that Star Wars created, and the boundaries that were pushed by the filmmaking in Star Wars. It's got the greatest, most iconic score of all time, film score. It's got the most iconic character designs, weapons, vehicles, world building. Star Wars is an absolute landmark film, and I know a lot of people today watching and like, oh, it was simple. Well, yeah, but it started everything. It started every big summer blockbuster you've seen. It is the foundational piece of filmmaking. It's foundational piece of cinema history. It's foundational piece of sci-fi and fantasy. So absolutely S tier. It's a masterpiece. But on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, we've got the Star Wars Holiday Special. And yes, I said every film and television series. So the Holiday Special is on the opposite end, the absolute worst thing Star Wars has ever made. It's just an absolute disaster, really. The story is awful. It's all about Chewbacca's family, but there's no subtitles. We have no idea what they're saying. A lot of bits that just don't make any sense. I think we all know, just like I don't need to really expand on Star Wars: A New Hope for why it's S tier. I don't really need to expand on why Holiday Special is F. That smells stinker whiff because it's awful. Again, going back with the extremes of this franchise, Empire Strikes Back is the best Star Wars movie that's ever come out. That's a majority opinion, but I also hold that majority opinion. The pacing in this film is second to none. It's one of the best paced films ever. The score is elevated from the first one with the Imperial March edition. It's hard to believe that's even possible. The introduction of Yoda, Emperor Palpatine, mainstays of this franchise, as well as just the way this plot is constructed when you have the cat and mouse chase with the Millennium Falcon and Darth Vader and everybody being chased in the asteroid field and all of that. And then on the flip side, you got Luke training with Yoda. You add that constant action never lets you get any sense of relief. And when you're with Luke and Yoda, that provides you with some world building. And it's just a brilliant formula because you're constantly engaged on one end, but on the other end, you're engaged mentally the entire time. And then one of the greatest lightsaber duels ever to finish it off. I mean, this is absolutely an S tier. I rank it higher than A New Hope. It's a masterpiece. Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back. is one of the greatest films of all time. So then we got Return of the Jedi, which I know is a divisive one sometimes amongst the fan base. You have original trilogy fans who love it. You also have original trilogy fans who don't like it because of the Ewoks or the way certain elements were plugged in. You have some division amongst prequels and sequel fans who like to target this one because it is by far the weakest of the three. But that being said, the strong elements in Return of the Jedi are some of the strongest elements in any Star Wars film. The throne room scene with Palpatine and Vader is one of my favorite Star Wars things ever, with Luke as well, obviously. But it's just all of that is immaculate. John Williams' score again is fantastic. The Battle of Endor is excellent. I don't dislike the Ewoks. I like it. The ground battle on Endor is also quite good. Speeder bike chase has been dated a little bit, but is a fun actiony scene. And obviously Jabba's palace, which feels like a completely disconnected, separate film sometimes from Return of the rest of Return of the Jedi, the main plot of Return of the Jedi. But it is so amazing. It's one of the best openings of any Star Wars movie, and I love the world building, the creature design. I've gone on Star Wars Lads about the background characters in that scene and how many random weirdos I love from that moment. I love Return of the Jedi despite its flaws, and I think most Star Wars films, basically, except for these two, have flaws. You're not going to have find projects on really any level that don't. And I usually only limit the S tier to five movies at most, or five things at most. I don't have to do five, but I do at most five. I think Return of the Jedi for me is A. It's definitely a step down from these, but I have it in my upper half of my Star Wars rankings for the films, and I truly do love so many aspects of this film, and it's well paced as well. I don't think it's a boring movie by any means. Again, dropping all the way down, talking about the pacing of the original trilogy, which is so good for the most part, and then going to the pacing of Caravan of Courage, the first Ewoks movie. What a boring film. Oh my god, this movie is awful. And the main character, I'm so sorry, I don't know your name, or I mean, I know the character's name, but I don't know the actor's name. His character is Mace. Oh my god, Mace. This is one of the worst, most obnoxious characters in Star Wars. What an awful movie. I really don't like this movie. I've seen bits and pieces when I was younger. I watched it for the first time actually when it came on Disney Plus last year, all the way through, and it was so hard to get through. I'm putting it an F. It's really, really bad. So then we have Droids and Ewoks, which I'll kind of lump together. Droids and Ewoks for me was not a staple of my childhood. I was much more into the 2003 Clone Wars. Ewoks and Droids was something that I'd seen moments of, but I admire more so with Ewoks than Droids, the animation style and kind of the world building. I think Droids can have its moments, but it is kind of a more stiff animation style. More clunky, where Ewoks feels more in like that Saturday cartoon Disney, like early Cartoon Network style cartoon, where it's just fun and kind of rescue rangers, like it's that type of animation style. And I think I dig that a bit more about Ewoks. Regardless, I'm putting both of them in E. They're not great. So and I don't have that nostalgia kick to put them higher. I know some of you probably watching this will be like, oh, I actually really enjoyed those shows as a kid and they're still nostalgic for me. That's great. And I feel like that's really the only way you can truly love them. But they are important pieces of Star Wars history nonetheless, but I'm going to put them in E. Ewoks Battle for Endor. This is the second Ewoks film similar to Caravan of Courage. I watched this last year. I watched it last year for the first time, seen bits and pieces over the years. I'm shocked how much better it is than Caravan of Courage, purely just because it's more entertaining. It's not as boring. I know there's a lot weirder elements like Wicket speaking English or basic in this film, but at least there's some action and there's some attempts at doing some type of like weird world building where Caravan of Courage is very much so just exists on Endor, and like people want to get off Endor. It doesn't really embrace Endor. This embraces Endor and embraces a lot of the weird creatures and stuff that would ultimately kind of flesh out the world building of the Ewok show. I actually like this one a lot better. That being said, it's still not a very good movie. In fact, I'm going to put it in E probably after these shows just because these are made for kids And I mean, I guess this is made for kids too, but it's a live action movie and it's cheesy. I don't really ever want to watch it again, I guess, is what I'm saying, where I could see myself watching a couple episodes of Ewoks and Droid. The Phantom Menace. So here's the first one of like a bunch of hot button topics, because it's prequels versus sequels a lot of times now in fandom. And I don't think there really should be. I love all of it for what it does. Each film does well. The Phantom Menace for me is a film that does so many things well. This is actually the first Star Wars film I ever saw as a kid. And I grew up with this movie, loving it, watching it hundreds of times, watching so many of the different scenes from it, not just Duel of the Fates, but also the pod race. And there's a lot of great iconic moments. Qui-Gon Jinn is fantastic in this movie. I would be, remiss if I don't acknowledge that there are plenty of flaws in this film. Regardless, I still think this is a good movie, and I enjoy quite a bit of The Phantom Menace, mainly just because it's a credit to how much good Star Wars has come out relatively recently. And like I think the list in general might be a little skewed towards that. I'm gonna put it at the top of C for now. Same kind of criteria goes for Attack of the Clones. It's got the Obi-Wan investigation stuff. I love the detail in there, even though, yes, it is a lot of dense exposition that's explained very briefly. And like you have to watch the movie multiple times to kind of understand everything that's going on. I do love everything that Obi-Wan, Jango Fett, the Confederacy of Independent Systems, all the origination of the Separatist. I think there's a lot of great ideas here. Where the movie drags is definitely the love story between Anakin and Padme. Some of the dialogue, we've talked about the flaws of the Attack of the Clones. You all know the flaws. I'm very aware of the flaws of this movie, and I think the flaws are more blatant and harder to look past than the Phantom Menace's flaws. So in that regard, I do think I like this film a little less than the Phantom Menace. I'll put it right after it and see. Nonetheless, there's so many things I absolutely love about the film. Most of all, the end. I love, love, love the Geonosis arena. Everything that happens in there, from the initial onset of the arena with the creatures and Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Padme, the Accolade, Nexu, and Reek. And then you have, after that, the whole Jedi versus droids battle, everything that goes on there. And I really dig, and I feel like this is such an underrated part of the film that people don't really talk about. It gets overshadowed between the arena and then the Dooku battles. Start of the Clone Wars, the Battle of Geonosis is a great battle. I love it, and I love how it has a war feel. Everybody talks about Rogue One with that war feel, and yes, it does have it, but Attack of the Clones was the first one to really give us that. Like, it's hardcore. You see ships going down. The cinematography in that scene is maybe my favorite cinematography in all of Star Wars. Fantastic stuff. Love when the Trade Federation ship crashes and the sand is blowing everywhere, and the clones and the droids are shooting in that dust storm. And there's some amazing looking stuff in that fight. Absolutely love it. And then we've got the Clone Wars, or no, just Star Wars Clone Wars. Star Wars Clone Wars is one of my favorite Star Wars things. The new Star Wars The Clone Wars is better in regards to its characters. Obviously, it's a lot longer. It's way more episodes. It fleshes out everything. This is just kind of a brief encapsulation of everything that's gone on during the Clone Wars, and really gives us a look at all of that. But gosh, the action and the crazy things that go on in this, and Ginty Tartakovsky's animation style works so well with the introduction of Ventress and of course General Grievous, who's absolutely the best in this. He's way better here than he ever was in Revenge of the Sith or in the Clone Wars. So I love this show, and I think it's definitely one of the more beloved parts of Legends that got axed in the canon transition. I'm putting it in B. Revenge of the Sith. So Revenge of the Sith is my favorite Star Wars movie. I'm putting it in S. Revenge of the Sith, I think, has the best Star Wars story of all time. It is the fall of Anakin Skywalker to becoming Darth Vader. It's the story we were all waiting for, and I'll be lying if I say it's not a heavy nostalgia film. It is. It's the most nostalgic movie I could possibly watch. I love, love, love this movie. I've watched it probably 200 plus times. I know every single line. I know everything about it. It's incredible. No, it is not a better film than Empire Strikes Back. It is not a better film than A New Hope. I do think it's actually a better film than Return of the Jedi. I think to me, it's still easily the third best Star Wars movie. But It's my favorite, and I think this list is such a combo of favorites and some objectivity. Like, I think the other two prequels have enough flaws to where I can definitely say, yeah, I'll put them down here because as much as I love them, I can't really ignore that. I can ignore a lot of the flaws in Revenge of the Sith because I don't think it has nearly as many. And to me, the ones it does have are a lot lesser. I love Revenge of the Sith. It's my favorite movie probably ever. Star Wars The Clone Wars, the movie. Star Wars The Clone Wars movie, I saw in theaters multiple times. It's actually my first midnight movie I ever went to. There were about 5 people in the theater. But I really enjoy the experience of this. Looking back on it, it is very strange. It's like the way Filoni directed this, as well as just all the components that make it up. There's a lot of things that just don't really flow that well. It's like a very much so an outlier, even though it's supposed to connect to the TV show. TV show goes a very different direction in a lot of its tone, a lot of its setting, a lot of its character work. This is a very like secular movie, even though it's connected to that show, and it's very interesting how you look at it. It's not the most well constructed. There's a lot of things I really like about it. I do like the attempts at really giving us some more feel to it. I like the attempts at fleshing out the clones that eventually were built upon and expanded upon in the show. I'm internally in its debt for giving us that incredible show. But the movie itself is one of the lesser arcs of the show, if you wanted to call it that. It does have a lot of flaws. But that being said, I'll probably put it in D because it's a lot to live up to, and well, and the rest of the list is a lot to live up to. So speaking of the show, I love this show, and it's one of my favorite Star Wars things ever. I'm putting it in A. I think it's an incredible achievement, something that's tied the prequels together so nicely, and I think really helped build on that transition into the era of prequel love that we're having now, or at least we were having now. We'll talk about Obi-Wan Kenobi a little later, but I think Clone Wars is just it's built with such care, it's built with such love, and you can feel the infusion of Star Wars world building that's really in there from Lucas and Filoni teaming up for so many years to build this whole thing and create such a wonderful piece of Star Wars that has some of my favorite Star Wars characters, favorite Star Wars moments. It is truly is like the most quintessential thing that's not one of the films that you can watch. And I feel like for most fans nowadays, even casual fans, most people have seen the Clone Wars. It's wonderful seeing that transition. And as somebody who's been here since I've watched the Clone Wars since the very first episode, every single week it came out. So I'm a day one diehard Clone Wars fan, been around for the entire long haul. I never once had to catch up on anything. Watched it every single week. It's nice to see people starting to accept it, just like I've always loved the prequels because I grew up with them, and people are finally starting to come around to a lot of the ideas there. Star Wars Rebels. Star Wars Rebels is another one that I think a lot of people have had mixed feelings on, but the majority of people think this is a really great show, and I absolutely agree. I think there's wonderful, wonderful character work here. It's very hard to compare to the Clone Wars, even though a lot of people like to do that because it's both Dave Filoni. But Rebels is a smaller scale show with a smaller cast of characters that focuses on one particular thing, where the Clone Wars is very expansive and gives us tons of characters and tons of new characters and really tries to give us a fuller sense of what the galaxy looked like during this chaotic period, the first real chaotic period it had seen in so long. Rebels is in the midst of a chaotic period. It's in the midst of ultimately where we're going with A New Hope and its transition from 5 years before all the way to the events of A New Hope. I think it does it wonderfully. Its character work is fantastic. Because it is a longer show and because it has a smaller scale, it doesn't have the benefit of doing arcs like the Clone Wars does, where it can keep the stories fresh because it doesn't really have a chronology that it has to follow. Rebels follows a timeline that progresses and the characters age, and we get further into the events and farther down the timeline. So there's a lot of filler in its 20 plus episode seasons. I think for that I have to ding Rebels a little bit. I can't put it in the top tier of Star Wars with A or S, but I'm definitely going to put it at the top of B. The Force Awakens. So we're into the Disney era. I mean, we're with Rebels, but with The Force Awakens really kicks it off. The Force Awakens, I absolutely love this film. I was there day one. watching it in the theaters. I wish we could go back to that time when everybody was unified on their excitement for Star Wars. I think the only negative of that time was people still didn't like the prequels, and us prequel fans were like hiding, like the prequels are good, and everybody's like, no, no, go back to the original trilogy, real sets, practical effects, blah, blah, blah. And it all works. I think in The Force Awakens, it's great. It's such a fantastic nostalgia trip. I know so many people like to slander this movie because it doesn't have a completely unique whole narrative. Well, all the Star Wars movies don't have completely unique narratives. They've all built on each other. George Lucas has talked about that many times. And I think when we look back at the era of 2015, a lot of people who tried to disparage this film don't like to live back in the moment. They don't like to live in a world that everybody was like, give us something safe, give us something Star Warsy. Well, to all of you and to Disney, the people making this film, Star Warsy was give us an original trilogy type story. Well, they did. And now everybody's like, oh, you gave us too much of an original trilogy story. No, this movie is great. I loved it. I'm putting it in A actually, and it has a heavy nostalgia for me. It's one of the best movie theater experiences, the best movie experience I've ever had. So Rogue One, another one that I think is really, really great. Rogue One could have been an absolute disaster with the reshoots and the restructuring the entire story after most of it was shot. It could have been a disaster. It wasn't. A fantastic movie, an emotional movie, a movie that's driven by some really solid characters, even though they're not the most fleshed out, obviously, of the entire Disney movie era, but I think they were good enough to where I definitely cared about them as they started going down one by one. Very, very strong emotional ending. The Battle of Scarif, I think, is the best battle that has been done in the really post Return of the Jedi, in terms of space battle and ground battle and like true warfare in film. This is the best one we've seen in a long time. It's one of the best space battles, honestly, ever. And that Darth Vader scene at the end, absolutely fantastic. I think Rogue One suffers upon rewatches over and over. I've seen this movie probably 10 or 15 times now. It does have a very, very shaky beginning. The pacing is a little off. It's jumpy. It doesn't really let you get attached to its characters until really Edu. Everything on Jeddah is a little fast paced. Everything before is also fast paced. I think this movie in the first 30 to 40 minutes could use some tightening up, and that's what really prevents it for me from being in that A tier. I'm going to place it in B, and I think just behind Rebels, which I think, has stronger character work overall, but Rogue One is a darn good movie. I really, really like a lot of Rogue One. Okay, so you're damned if you do, damned if you don't with The Last Jedi. I think everybody has an opinion on this film, and I'm of the opinion that I think a lot of it is great. I think there's a lot of really interesting things that are done with The Last Jedi that don't necessarily completely pay off in The Rise of Skywalker. I think the choice to make Rey a nobody was a bold one that I actually enjoyed. Loved the Force dyad, what began with the Force dyad here in The Last Jedi. All of that was really good. Luke, I think I like the direction they take Luke, but I've said it many times on Star Wars Lads. If you want to go watch any of our videos about Last Jedi or anything about Luke and Mandalorian over there, said this many times about Luke. I don't buy that just Kylo turning and destroying his temple created this man that you see in The Last Jedi. For me, there's way more there. And as we start to explore that in The Mandalorian and hopefully into the future, and then we got Shadow of the Sith, which just came out, as we start to explore the downfall of Luke Skywalker, the Luke Skywalker who was the greatest hero in the galaxy, this icon who ultimately let the world down, the galaxy down again. To me, there needs to be more there. Whether that is a Mara Jade type character who is killed, whether it is constant tragedy, constant loss, constant failings that build on Luke that cause him to fall into this person that we see in The Last Jedi, I think there's something there. So I like a lot of what they do here with Luke because I think it's very, very plausible he turns into this person, but at the same time, I'd like to see more. Don't love that Luke dies in this movie, especially in hindsight with Carrie Fisher dying. I would have loved to have him a bigger role in The Rise of Skywalker. Nonetheless, though, cinematography is absolutely fantastic. It's one of the best Star Wars movies. It's one of the best directed Star Wars movies. Say what you want about Rian Johnson, who is a very nice person and a very great filmmaker, but the direction here is very solid. Like every frame you can tell is uniquely crafted to his specifications. Now, whether you like those specifications, up for you to interpret, but it's well directed. You cannot argue it's not well directed. Most of my problems with Last Jedi are with its storytelling and with its writing. Not particularly huge fan of the Finn Rose plotline. Most people aren't. I don't hate it like a lot of people do, but I think it's the weakest element by far and very noticeably of the film, which then, lends itself to constant criticism. But, all of that said, even all with the rambling and me trying to like both defend and deprecate The Last Jedi, I do think it's actually quite a good movie. I'm putting it at the bottom of my B tier here right now. A Solo, a Star Wars story, to me is it's never really bad, but it's also never really great for me. And it's the one Star Wars film out of the 11 live action Star Wars films we have that I just never really think about. And it's only when I go back and do a Star Wars marathon once a year that that's when I watch Solo. It's just never in my mind. It doesn't really do much for me other than Leo Primic, who's one of my favorite Star Wars characters ever now. Uh, Solo Star Wars story is just okay. It's good. I don't really hate anything about it. I like Alden Ehrenreich as Han. I like Donald Glover as Lando. I like what was done here. I wish we got to see more because I feel like that would help pay off a lot of what's in this. Nonetheless, it is the most forgettable to me. It is the most bland to me. And for that reason, I'm actually going to put it on the bottom of my C right now. So Resistance. Resistance is a show that is definitely made for kids. So it is hard to rank Resistance because it does have that like very, very childish feel. End of season one, beginning of season two, I think the story at least starts to progress. You start to get a little bit more payoff for watching it, a little bit more canon nuggets. That being said, it never really gets expansive, never really gets important. It's very, very small, but I don't think it's necessarily a bad show, especially if you're watching it through the eyes of someone who's like 6, who this show is definitely made for. And I don't want to really disparage it because it's just, it's not really that bad. I think because of the storytelling, I'd put it a little higher than Ewoks and Droids, although again, I didn't grow up with Ewoks or Droids, so I don't know, maybe Ewoks higher. I think I'll put it. This is tough. I think I'll put it in D. Yeah, I don't want to think too hard about Resistance. I think I'll put it in D. The Mandalorian, which everybody loves, The Mandalorian. I think The Mandalorian is a fantastic show. Season one is good. I think season one gets a little overhyped because season two was so great. I think season one has 3 really good episodes at the beginning, then it has 3 episodes that are okay to episode 5 is actually just straight bad. I think it's one of the worst, if not the worst episode of all of the Disney live action shows. And then 7 and 8 are really good. So I think season one is just good. I've always felt like it was a little overhyped. Season two is fantastic. Episode one is incredible. Episode two is probably the weakest point of season two. Still a really cool, weird sci-fi episode. And then 3, you got Bo-Katan. Gosh, I love the Ahsoka episode in season 2. Also the Luke stuff at the end, the return of Boba Fett. There's so many incredible things in season 2 that like I feel like season 2 is definitely an A for me. Season 1 is like a low B to a high C. I think for that reason, I'm going to put it in B. I put it at the top of B right now. Obviously, also with Mandalorian, there's a couple more seasons coming, and really the finality of that entire arc, which we'll see through Ahsoka as well. We haven't seen any of that, so the show could get progressively worse. It could also get progressively better if we have each season be better and better and better. If season 3 is even better than season 2, this will be an A tier by next tier list. Now talking about the Rise of Skywalker, I do think The Rise of Skywalker is the weakest film out of the Disney era in terms of its filmmaking. It is very, very, very messy in its first 20, 30 minutes. The pacing is so breakneck and disastrous. And it was watching it for the first time, I was like, oh no. But I am a massive fan of Revenge of the Sith and a massive fan of Palpatine. So just getting a little giddy and enjoying those like goofy Palpatine moments, they were back. And I really dug a lot of what they did with Palpatine here. I think The Rise of Skywalker, I've said this many times, The Rise of Skywalker has so many brilliant ideas, so many really interesting things that it can do and has done with its storytelling. And that's why I'm very excited for Shadow of the Sith and very excited for the Mandalorian future and so many things that can really get fleshed out, especially tie it back to some area of the Empire type plot points, all of that type stuff. There's some really, really, really cool things that the Rise of Skywalker set up that you can do with Sith Eternal and all of that. But none of it's really, really fleshed out in this at all. I think some of the character stuff with Rey and Ben Solo work quite well. Finn, again, unfortunately, very relegated to just being the guy who's around on missions. Same with Poe, doesn't really have that much of an arc. Unfortunately, it also was plagued by the passing of Carrie Fisher, which left a bit of a hole there for our original trilogy characters. Billy D. Williams does his best to bridge that hole, but he's not in this film as much as I feel like he should have been. So really, it boils down to how much I love Palpatine and how much I love some of the ideas that were brought up with Palpatine and the Sith Eternal. I think there can be a lot of great stuff in this film, could improve over time. That being said, I'm gonna drop it and see, and I do think it might be better than Attack of the Clones, but I like Attack of the Clones far more. I rewatched Attack of the Clones way more, and I do think Solo is better than it. However, just because there are a lot more things that actually feel exciting to me in The Rise of Skywalker, even though there's a lot of things that are not good. I will probably put it above Solo right now in C. Okay, so this is the Lego Star Wars Holiday Special. Not too much to talk about. It's a decent little TV movie special. I enjoy what it brought to the table. Nonetheless, it is very, very simple. I think when we're comparing the two Lego films, I like this one a little bit more. I'd actually probably put it in D. The Bad Batch, season one of The Bad Batch. I enjoy season one of The Bad Batch quite a bit. It does have a little bit meandering. It's not as long as Rebels seasons were, but it still is a linear story. So it does have a lot of filler or some episodes that feel really disappointing. But I feel like the highs of The Bad Batch worked quite well. Personally, for me, episode one was the best. The 1 hour little movie episode I thought was fantastic. It never really got to those highs again for me, but I do really like this crew. I'm very excited for season two coming at the end of the year. So I will put Bad Batch currently with only one season at the bottom of B because I think it has a lot of potential. I think it will be excellent by the time the show's over. I think we'll like it as much as Rebels and as much as Clone Wars. I think it has a really strong opportunity here to wrap up a lot of stuff with the clones, and I'm very excited for that. Star Wars Visions, it was an interesting little project. I really, really loved about three, maybe four of the shorts. I really, really loved The Elder. I thought that was a great little short film. I'm also a massive fan of The Village Bride. I thought that was a really interesting, unique look at the Force as well. The Ninth Jedi was the one with the best world building, the most potential in the future. And then The Duel was just very, very cool. Everything else was just kind of forgettable, kind of flat to me. There were Tatooine Rhapsody was the only one I was like, not really crazy about that. Not a big fan of the Lope and Ocho short either. I felt like its storytelling wasn't very good, although its visuals were excellent. I like the show. I can't say I love it. I think probably just because of my absolute love for the prequels, I'm going to put it behind Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. Lego Star Wars Terrifying Tales. I was a little disappointed with this. I wanted to go a little bit more horror-y, a little bit more creative. It was all right. I'll probably put in an E. The Book of Boba Fett. The Book of Boba Fett is probably the hardest one to rank on here out of everything because the Book of Boba Fett, I think, is an absolutely messy, messy, messy show. Its overall plot structure from episode 1 to episode 7 is so sporadic and all over the place. It's just kind of I don't want to say disaster, but it's very, very nonchalant with the way it progresses its narrative and the way it just skips over things or shows things very briefly and then cuts away or just the whole flashback angle worked in part. Episode 2 I thought was really good. Episode 4 I thought was good but had some flaws. Episode 3 I thought was an absolute disaster. Episode 5 and 6 are what's excellent about the show. The only problem is they have no Boba Fett, so it's hard to. Episode 5 has literally no Boba Fett. Episode 6 has him in a scene where he doesn't even talk. So it's really hard to rate the show based on those two episodes. And in my mind, I kind of just leave those episodes out. Like if I'm watching The Mandalorian and doing a binge of The Mandalorian, I'd probably skip the Book of Boba Fett and just watch episode 5 and 6 of that show. Episode 6 might be my favorite live action Star Wars episode in television, which is hard to say because the Book of Boba Fett, I just feel like there's so much missed opportunity here. There's so much potential for stories. I know I can name probably 10 stories off the top of my head that I wanted to see more than this. And it's not one of those like I'm very much so a fan that doesn't let their expectations get in the way of reality and what we're seeing. We can't let our preconceptions for what we want outweigh what is being shown to us because not everybody thinks like us, right? Yeah, not everybody is you or me. Everybody has a different story to tell. But I could think of at least 10 other stories I would have rather seen Boba Fett do in the same context of him being the ruler of Tatooine, him being the daimyo. I think there's a lot of interesting ideas there, and none of them were explored. I love that they brought Black Chrysanthemum in here. Love, love, love everything in episode 6. Everything that doesn't have Boba Fett, I think, is awesome. I just wanted more from the Boba Fett stuff. I wanted more from the crime underworld stuff. I thought the hut angle in episode 2 when they brought those huts in, I thought that was an interesting idea. Love Cad Bane in the show too. I thought he was excellent, but he should have been in the first episode and then carried all the way through the end as the central antagonist, excuse me. But the person who's showing that progression for Boba, we never really get to see that because it happens in the last episode and like 5 minutes of the second to last episode. The whole show just never felt like it really knew what it wanted to do, what it wanted to be. It's really hard to rank because if we're including those 2 episodes, 5 and 6 of the show that are basically Mandalorian season 2.5, and the rest of the show is the kind of Boba Fett show, then I would put it like, probably in high C. But after that, without those episodes, I really want to put it like I don't think it was that good. I think I'd put it in either, even with all the rambling, I do think it's a little bit more competent just because of those episodes than the rise. Like I can't put it after the Rise of Skywalker or Solo. I guess I'll put it there. So now we get to the final one, Obi-Wan Kenobi, the one that everybody's talking about, the one that just ended. And Obi-Wan Kenobi, if you haven't watched any of our videos on Star Wars Lads, is my all-time favorite Star Wars character. I absolutely love Obi-Wan Kenobi. I grew up with Obi-Wan being my favorite character, and Ewan McGregor being a large part of why he's my favorite character. I was extremely excited for the show, probably the second most excited Star Wars project I've been in the Disney era, right behind Force Awakens. Other than that, I don't think I've been more excited for a Disney era Star Wars project. And I loved a lot of the show. I thought they did a great job with episode 1 and 2. Episode 3, I thought was fantastic. Episode 4 was where I thought was a complete letdown. They should have gone into a direction more so exploring Obi-Wan as a person, his mentality, and exploring Reva as a person and her mentality. I don't really want to get into the whole Reva debate. I think she's a very interesting, fascinating character. They did a lot of really good things with her that can be really fascinating for the future. Although they need to give us a little bit more on why she's in this show in particular. I think if she would have died in episode 5, I think that would have been a great conclusion to her arc. But I would be completely open to seeing more because I think what she brought here as a character is quite interesting. It's just the fact that it's the Obi-Wan Kenobi show. And I feel like some of that time could have been devoted a bit more to Obi-Wan, especially episode 4. Internally, I wanted to see Obi-Wan. He reaches rock bottom in episode 3 when Vader just absolutely destroys him and burns him. I wanted to see Obi-Wan exploring a bit more of himself, removing that mental block that was obviously there because when we see by the time we get to episode 4, 5, and 6, Obi-Wan's back to being Obi-Wan. So there was obviously a mental hurdle he overcame. We never got to really see it. We get it briefly for like 5 seconds at the beginning of episode 4. It's tough to rank because I do think the show, its highs are very, very high. I think it did a great job. There are structural problems, obviously, with my dislike of episode 4 that bring the show down and then it goes back up. I think overall, though, because of the highs it has, and because Obi-Wan is my favorite character, completely biased here. I know. I'm putting it at probably the top of B. I really, really enjoyed so much of what they did with the Obi-Wan and Vader dynamic. I thought Ewan McGregor absolutely killed it in the show. I think this is the second best performance as Obi-Wan after Revenge of the Sith. Vader, Hayden Christensen, all of that. Absolutely fantastic. Loved it. And then, arguably my favorite part of the whole show, Princess Leia. Vivian Blair, I believe is her name, the actress who plays her. Fantastic. Absolutely loved it. She carries such a poise about her, but she's also like you can tell she's Leia. It's Leia as a child. It really feels like it. She's got that demeanor. She walks with her chest puffed down, her arms back, like she owns the room, right? But then there's times where she's vulnerable when she's learning, she's asking questions, she's experiencing the world and really becoming the Leia we see in the rest of the series. But there's those moments when she's not afraid to be Leia, and really Obi-Wan and Leia's relationship, besides the Obi-Wan and Vader dynamic, the Obi-Wan Leia relationship was the heart and soul of this show. I absolutely loved it. It expands on so many things from the original trilogy that I thought were great. And it's such a beautiful epilogue to Revenge of the Sith as well. Thank you all so much for watching. Let me know down below in the comments what you think of my list, or what you would, how you would rank them all. And I will be getting to that video where I talk about Phase 5 of the MCU, my predictions for the films coming out, and some of the people might be playing some of the characters, and what we might be seeing here in the future, since it is such a hot button topic. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.